What is up, YouTube? I'm Devon DaVinci, leader of the Renaissance Crew, and you're watching DaVinci Reacts. Today I have another video for you guys that talks about a historical figure. This figure in particular that this episode or this video is going to be talking about is the legendary first black boxing heavyweight champion of the world, and that is Jack Johnson. For those of you that don't know about Jack Johnson, the man was ahead of his time in many regards. Somebody that I've done a bit of research into. Not a ton of research, but I do know about his life story as far as like the broad generic stuff. So I ran across this video. This video was created by Rainy Day Boxing. Rainy Day Boxing made this video, and I really don't know what to expect. I mean, obviously it's going to talk about the boxer himself, but I'm wondering if it's going to talk about a particular point in his life. I do know that he had a situation where he was stripped of his boxing license because of really racist policies and stuff. He was caught up in some type of law that they pretty much created just for him, and it led to him being in trouble. Now, one of the things that Jack Johnson did that to me was one of the most balling, badass things he's ever done, and I'm sure some of you out there might have heard about this story. The guy was somebody that really liked to live life on the edge, and there was one particular story where he was speeding throughout a town, and at the time, this is like the 1917s, something like that. Black people were obviously not on the same level as we are now, like at least as far as like the treatment that we received from police and things like that. So he was speeding through a town, and a cop pulled him over and stopped him, and they told him that you were getting a ticket because you were going this fast in this particular whatever area, so you have to pay a ticket. What he did was he looked at the ticket, he saw how much the fine was, he gave the cop, I believe it was like 3 times as much as the ticket was valued at, and he said, "Here, this is extra because I'm about to go around 2 more times." That's the most badass shit I've ever heard in my life. So the man, like I said, was ahead of his time. He was somebody that ran by the beat of his own drum, and I look forward to seeing what this video has to say. So let's jump into it and see what it has to offer. Also, there will be a link for Rainy Day Boxing at the end of this video. Be sure to check that out. And watch the original before you watch this
is the
reaction.
Audacious smile of one of the most controversial and inspiring men in sporting history. An iconic grin that enraged those who oppressed, and a symbol of hope to those who are not truly free. Born a second-class citizen in his own country, to then one day become the most recognizable African-American on the planet. Rainy Day Boxing brings you Jack Johnson, a boxing legend.
I don't know what he had. Who talked to him? I'm bold. He was crazy.
Ali said I was bold. He was crazy. Yeah, because when Ali went through all his turmoils outside of the ring, it was during a time where society was changing. So it wasn't like he was doing it alone. I mean, he did have his back against the wall, obviously, but there was a lot of people that were fighting for change around the same time. When Jack Johnson was doing his thing, there was no civil rights movement. It was just him by himself going up against an entire system of prejudice and racism, and the man did not back down for a second. It's crazy. It's inspiring, crazy, but inspiring.
Jack Johnson, big inspiration.
I don't think enough people know about him either.
He was so bold. Jack Johnson was a black man back when white people lynched Negroes on weekends. They would send him letters saying, "You fighting a white man and nigger, if you knock him out, we'll kill you." He said, "Just kill my black buggers. I'm gonna knock this white man cold." He knocked the white man out.
You liked him.
There's a story about that fight too. I forgot the person he was fighting against, but he was somebody that was a friend of Jack Johnson's, and I don't know if they're going to explain it in this video at some point. I might make this a 2-part video because there's a lot of things that I probably want to talk about. That fight in particular, so what happened was Jack Johnson had just won the heavyweight championship, and let me know if I'm wrong about something, because there could be something I could be mistaken about. But Jack Johnson had just won a heavyweight championship, and there was already a conspiracy to try to get the belt off of him. That's where the whole term "the Great White Hope" comes from. It was a search for a white athlete that would be able to come in and beat Jack Johnson. That's where the entire term originates from. So what Jack Johnson did was he set up this fight with his friend who was white. So he figured he can kill two birds with one stone. Everybody wants to see a white person fight him. They're willing to pay a lot of money. So I can set up this fight with this guy who's really my friend, and we can split this giant payout together. So he set up this fight, and during the fight, the friend decided, hey, what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually try to knock Jack Johnson out, and if I do, I'm going to get all this acclaim and all this attention and all this fame and stuff for being the white person that knocked out Jack Johnson or beat Jack Johnson. So without Jack Johnson knowing, this guy kind of went into business for himself and started to really lay it in on Jack Johnson. And I think at one point he actually knocked him down. That was the first time he's ever been knocked down in his career. And so Jack Johnson, realizing what the hell was going on, was like, okay, got up and proceeded to whoop the hell out of his friend, to the point where they said at the end of the fight, there were pieces of his friend's teeth ingrained into his gloves. That's how hard he hit him, that his teeth were actually lodged inside of his boxing gloves. It's crazy.
They say I'm controversial. They say that I'm bold, but I wasn't nothing like Jack Johnson.
Johnson's story begins in Galveston, Texas,
they're actually gonna talk about it.
1878, the son of former slaves. His traumatic childhood took place at the beginning of segregation in America. As a young working boy, he labored in the many physically demanding and hazardous jobs of his time, all while working for the lowest wage. A period of his life that defined and shaped his muscular physique and mental courage. His fighting days began with his involvement in the battle royals.
I was about to say, a lot of people make it seem like slavery and stuff was a long time ago. When, if you look at this, Jack Johnson's parents were former slaves. Jack Johnson won his championships in the early 1900s. So that's like saying Jack Johnson could be someone's great-great-grandfather. And so that would mean that someone's Jack Johnson could be someone's great-grandfather. And that means that someone's great-great-grandfather could have been former slaves. My grandmother was born in 1927. My grandfather was born in 1913. So, I mean, it's not far-fetched to think that their parents would have been the children of slaves. It's not that long ago. My parents were in schools that were segregated.
A cruel contest where a group of young African-American boys were blindfolded and forced to fight for the entertainment of the social elite. The majority of the time, Jack Johnson was the last man standing.
I'm sure he was scarred from his background.
The James Brown
but
movie.
He wasn't humbled.
They
by
talked
his
about him growing up doing the same
he had
thing.
This rebellious spirit.
He was a very aggressive type of individual. He had a rough life.
Started fighting at the age of 13. He had his first professional fight at the age of 16 years.
The dude is physically impressive considering the time frame. That era, when it came to not just boxing but fitness in general, was really low. Like the awareness of how to do these things. A lot of people.
I don't have any information.
Google, stop. Sorry, didn't mean for that to happen. But yeah, knowledge of fitness and things like that were low. So to see the dude, he was obviously a physical specimen. I don't see him losing fights legitimately in his time. There weren't a lot of people his size.
The opportunities that a black boxer would get today, and Johnson, in fact, was pushed around, shoved around, as so many great black fighters were in those days.
Even the legendary.
Just to step inside of a boxing ring takes courage.
I'm sorry, I'm pausing a lot, but I'm gonna go back a little bit. Even the legendary bodybuilder at the time, what was his name? Eugene Sandow. I know his last name was Sandow. I'm blanking on his first name. But even he didn't have anywhere near the mass and size of Jack Johnson. Now, he had some definition to him, but this was around the same time, and Jack Johnson puts him to shame.
Fighters were in those days.
Just to step inside of a boxing ring takes courage. And then to know that virtually every person there hates
Back when
you,
they boxed
maybe
with pants.
hates you enough to kill you.
The sport of boxing, still in its early years of existence, was very much considered the white man's domain. Black boxers were heavily restricted and held back in the sport. Tough men and crude brawlers were held in the highest regard in those days. But when one crafty fighter with talent so undeniable began to climb the ranks, even white fight fans took notice. Johnson was one of the earliest men to master the sweet science. With the grace of a ballet dancer, he would demoralize and toy with his opponents.
He's gigantic.
Jack traveled the country, establishing his fighting superiority, humiliating his white combatants as he battered them without mercy.
Those punches
With
are
confidence
crazy.
that even Muhammad Ali could not rival, Jack Johnson knew he was destined to wear the crown.
At 6'1" and 212 pounds, Johnson is lean, hard, a master craftsman who loves to set his own pace.
He's only 212 pounds. Yeah, that's solid muscle right there. Somebody his size, just from looking at him, I would have assumed he was around 240. For him to be 212, that means that is 100% solid muscle.
Some fight experts consider Jack Johnson the perfect fighter.
He's fighting against somebody who looks like he's 160. It makes me think they didn't even have weight classes at this time.
Half a century ahead of his time. He was the first fighter who thought about self-preservation when he got into the ring. And Jack Johnson was absolutely unique.
For his time, he was a defensive genius.
We see Johnson demonstrate his Morse code prowess.
We got to give Mike Tyson more respect for just how much of a boxing historian the guy is. Mike Tyson's knowledge of boxing is crazy.
At his best, he was a superb athlete and considered by many the best defensive fighter in the sport.
Jack Johnson knew when to punch and where to punch. That he was not satisfied to merely beat his opponent. He had to taunt the man he was fighting.
Moran gets home with 2 good punches. The undaunted Johnson steps back
clapping for him.
A hearty round of applause.
Johnson stands off and flicks stinging left jab. Looks like the champ isn't ready to knock Ketchel out yet. Well, look at Johnson hold Ketchel up. He's attacked ferociously.
You see the way that he is like taunting and kind of just having fun with his opponents and stuff like that. People did not like that at the time. Matter of fact, Jack Johnson is, in a way, the reason why there wasn't another black heavyweight champion until Joe Louis, because after they finally did get the belt off of Jack Johnson, the heavyweight champions at the time, the white heavyweight champions, went out of their way to not give shots to black boxers just because of Jack Johnson. They didn't want to have another athlete like him holding the belt. So they intentionally didn't choose to fight against black fighters, which is, as great as Jack Dempsey was, that's something that I take points away from him because he didn't fight black fighters. He was somebody that carried that tradition over also.
The great Stanley Ketchel, the Michigan assassin, is out cold. Johnson wipes 2 of Ketchel's teeth from his glove.
This was the fight I was talking about.
He started to get the idea that, maybe he'd like to be heavyweight champion of the world.
However, since the creation of the sport, black contenders were denied a chance at the championship. They were limited to the colored heavyweight title. But this was an unwritten rule that Johnson refused to accept. White America's hero, Jim Jeffries, was the undefeated heavyweight champion, and although having had his manhood questioned by Johnson many times, he refused to give Jack a shot.
Yeah, he eventually came out of retirement to fight.
Too prestigious for black fighters.
To fight Jack Johnson.
This fellow Johnson is a fair fighter, but he is a black, and for that reason, I will never fight him.
When there are no white men left to fight, Jeffrey said, I will quit the business.
With Jeffrey's early retirement, the vacant title was fought for by 2 white fighters, one by Marvin Hart and then shortly taken by Canadian Tommy Burns. Unfortunately for Jack, Burns also drew the color line. But Jack hungered for the title like no man ever had or possibly ever will. For 2 years, Johnson pursued Burns around the country, even following him around the world. When Tommy traveled to London or Paris, Jack would be there, pestering the champion for a chance at the title, until finally, in Sydney, Australia, a wealthy promoter offered Burns $30,000 to fight Jack, a figure so large, if refused, his fear of Johnson would be exposed.
The fight was a sellout. A crowd of 20,000 people, the press and their cameras, gathered to watch the first ever championship fight between black and white.
And this was back in a time when boxing matches would last like 20 rounds.
Burns was on the floor. Burns got up and was knocked down again.
The challenger moves the champion around at will. Johnson is having a time.
He makes him look like a teenager.
Shots, even pointing to his ribs. Here, Tommy. Now, here.
Johnson merely played with the heavyweight champion. He would laugh and actually talk to the crowd as Burns was hitting to the stomach, laughing all the time. It was Johnson's way of demonstrating he had absolutely nothing to
just letting him hit him. Damn.
As the bell rings, Jack gives a friendly little wave. See you later, Mr. Tom.
Oh, that's demoralizing.
Merely toying with the champion, goading him on until the tiring Burns could no longer compete.
So far as damage was concerned, Burns never landed a blow.
He advances on the smaller man, and then suddenly, tiger-like, he attacks.
A good right uppercut. Another ripping right uppercut by Johnson.
Oof.
Now Johnson pours it on. Hooks, uppercuts. Burns is defenseless. This very moment, the police shut off the cameras.
See, and nowadays that would have been a fight stoppage.
Of a black man knocking out a white man and denied access to this historical moment.
The end of the white man's domination of the heavyweight championship.
After a decade-and-a-half-long career, Jack had fulfilled his dream. And so began the torment of all white supremacists. A Negro who had worldwide fame, wealth, tailored suits, automobiles, and now the most prized possession in all of sports. And what irked the moral purists more than anything was how he openly consorted with and married white women.
Yes. Yeah, you see what I mean? Like, he was somebody that I don't know how he was able to get away with it back in that time, because this was back in the day when just looking at a white person the wrong way could lead to someone being lynched, and there would be nobody asking any questions about it. Like, a person would get lynched, and then the very next day everybody would go about their business like it was nothing. This was back in the era when they used lynchings as postcards that they would give to friends like they were at a vacation or something. It'll be a picture of a group of white people all together smiling and stuff like that, and in the background be like somebody hung. And it was just like a postcard, like, wish you were here, you know, something like that. So I don't know how he was able to get away with it at the time. I mean, like I said, I admire him. The dude had balls for sure to do something like that at that time. Even Muhammad Ali, like I said, when he was doing his thing, there wasn't a lot of, well, there was a lot, but there wasn't as much fear among the black community, because during that time, the black community started fighting back. Like, that's when we started to really fight for our rights to be equal citizens. At the time of Jack Johnson, there was no fighting among black people. Like, this was around the time, I think, when the NAACP first got founded, back with W.E.B. Du Bois, Booker T. Washington, and Ida B. Wells. So they had figures that were fighting for equality, but it was a small fight. Like, there wasn't a lot of people out there like marching and things like that. Matter of fact, this was around the time with the second resurgence of the Ku Klux Klan. So the only people marching were the Klan. Like, this was back when judges, cops, politicians, and all of them were open, like, card-carrying members of the KKK. Like, they weren't hiding it. So, yeah, I mean, salute to you, Jack Johnson, for having balls bigger than anyone has ever had in possibly the history of the world damn sure the history of America. And I mean, you're a hero. I look forward to seeing. Recently, Donald Trump did give him a pardon. I did remember hearing about that. So they're going to talk. I'm pretty sure they're going to talk about what happened to him that led to him losing the belt, and the reason why he eventually got a pardon was because of a particular law that was created at the time, specifically designed to target Jack Johnson. So with part 2, I will be talking about that. I hope that you guys will come through and check it out. For now, this will be the end of part 1. I'm Devon DaVinci. Hopefully you've been a little more enlightened. I look forward to seeing what you guys have to say about this particular figure in the comment sections down below. Let me know if there's any facts about Jack Johnson that you might not know about. If you would like to know more about Jack Johnson, feel free to ask questions. I would hope that this community has a lot of people that would be willing to assist you. And if you need any more help, well, if I have to look it up, you can look it up. But I'll do my part to help any way I can. I do think he's a character that doesn't get a lot of attention, especially in like Black history. When you think about the figures of Black history, Jack Johnson isn't really somebody that gets mentioned a lot. So I would hope that by drawing attention to him, he can get more and more of the recognition that he deserves. Now, with that being said, I'm going to give you the deuces. I look forward to seeing you guys on the next video, which will probably come out tomorrow. And that's pretty much it. So, deuces. See you later.